That's 5 bumps. So that means you got 5 bumps before it catches up to your fixed. And if rates are going up, you can choose to lock in the future or just keep riding the variable. For all the advantages of getting out of a rental property, for instance, if you need to sell it or something like that, you only pay a 3-month penalty. So what else can I tell you about interest rates? I think that's pretty well it. One thing, if you do have a rental property, it doesn't hurt to have a mortgage, a readvanceable mortgage and a HELOC attached to it. A lot of people heard about the Smith maneuver and how you can make your mortgage tax deductible. If you have a readvanceable mortgage on your rental property, your HELOC can grow, and that ends up being a rainy day fund that you don't have to have cash in your bank account to fix emergencies. You can do it out of a HELOC, and it's all tax deductible. So if your mortgage is coming up for renewal and you want to ask me some questions, it doesn't really matter what bank it is, or I'm going to do your mortgage, I can certainly give lots of free advice and chat about your situation. So that's all for the mortgage side of things, Linda. So having a short break for fill your drinks or unfill your drinks, so to speak. So we'll be back in about 2 minutes here, and then we'll get into our guest speaker. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Sean.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very good, thank you. How about you?
Good. Did you spell your name wrong, or did I spell your name wrong?
I spelled my name wrong for some reason. I can probably change that. Interesting.
And you have capacity to share your screen and stuff, do you?
Yeah, it looks like it allows me to do it, so I'll be able to show my presentation as I go.
Yeah, hopefully you're
probably better than we were able
to. Sean, can you hear me all right? Is the quality there?
Yeah, you're good on your end there. So I'll just give everybody a minute or two to get back, and 7:15 we'll kick it off there. So
yeah, Sean, you got a couple questions in the chat on your mortgage section there.
Okay, let's see what they say. Someone asked which bank offers readvanceable mortgages. So all the big lenders, the big 5, offer readvanceable mortgages, and so that'd be Scotia, TD, RBC, CIBC, BMO offer a product like that. Also, MCAP offers that on the monoline side. They only offer theirs on owner occupied. All the big 5 banks would do it on rentals or owner occupied. So Nathan says, is a Scotia step or similar product any better or worse than Manulife 1 for the Smith maneuver? So my personal opinion is I prefer Scotia over Manulife, just because you have to do some work online to do the Manulife 1 with transferring funds around. The interest rates aren't quite as good at Manulife. That's my experience. I prefer Step, and TD just opened their product to the FlexLine product here on January 10th, and MCAP Fusion is also back in the picture there. So are there investors in the group using RRSP? I imagine there are. I use my RRSP to lend. So if you're,
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
I lend to Shanna for her Airbnbs in Canmore.
Yeah, so I don't borrow RRSP money, but I do lend it out. So you got any questions or want to know how to get started and stuff with Olympia Trust, for instance, or with your TFSA at Olympia, give me a shout. I could give you a couple of tips there. So. All right, 7:15, and we are back. Tonight we have a special guest speaker. His name is Brian Romineski. He's an urban planner with 25 years experience in Canada. He's the CEO of Permit Masters, which provides planning services across Canada. Brian's going to fill us in on land use planning strategies and real estate investment, talk about the concept of rezoning as value added. And also Brian will tell us why cities regulate development and criteria to select sites that can be candidates for rezoning. And I've referred Permit Masters to several of my clients who are wanting to do basement suites, and it's their first crack at it. They really don't know the ropes or how to navigate the permit maze, which can slow you down quite a bit and can cost you a lot of money if your permits are held up and you don't have the right ones, your contractor's on hold, and meanwhile you're paying interest on your money. So it's sometimes worth the investment to talk to the experts for your first one. So without further ado, we have Brian Romineski. Give yourself, if I missed anything in your introduction, you could add a little bit and share your slides with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for reaching out and inviting me to your presentation. And again, yeah, my name is Brian Romineski, and I'm CEO of Permit Masters. And tonight I want to talk about land use planning and give you some big picture and some detail that you could probably use to integrate into some of your investment strategies when it comes to buying properties or selling properties. And of course, we only have about 45 minutes, an hour, so you won't turn into an expert planner at the end of this. But I sure hope that through the presentation, I can bring up enough ideas for you to start having the wheels turning and trying to develop some criteria that would help you select a house. We see very often with most of the very successful investors, they'll have some land use strategies and zoning strategies, and they're part of their decision making right from the start. And it's as simple as this. If you're looking at 2 or 3 properties to purchase, as you all know, when we try to buy something to add to a portfolio, we look at dozens and dozens of properties. And at the end of the day, you have to select between the few that you really like. And very often with investors, they'll look at the quality of the building. Do they have a roof that has been updated recently? And these are all very good criteria when you're purchasing, whether you're going to flip the house or whether you're going to buy and hold. But to add some criteria, some zoning criteria in that decision making, you sometimes might not end up with the same selection you started with. And you may open the door with some great return on your investment on the long term if you do it right. And that's what I want to do today. I want to be able to give you that big picture understanding and start getting you thinking about what else can I think that goes beyond just the building that I'm looking to purchase. I'll just share my presentation here. Before I start, and I don't know if anybody's ever seen any of my presentation, but I'm a big fan of the analogy of Thomas Waite, and it's the toaster analogy. And I'll tell a little bit of story here. It's this engineer out of England a few years back, probably almost 10 years now, who an engineer by trade, and he embarked into this big objective to actually build the toaster from scratch. And We're not talking about building a toaster by buying some parts at Home Depot. He actually went out and decided to build a toaster straight from scratch, like going to the mine to pick up the ore, to make the steel, to create the toaster. And he has a lot of videos on YouTube that are still up there, extremely painful to watch, but a very interesting exercise. It took him a year. He built a toaster that didn't look at all like a toaster, and ended up turning it on, and the toaster caught on fire within a couple of minutes. And I guess the moral of the story is you can spend your whole life building a toaster, or you can buy one for $20 at Walmart. And he actually wrote a book about the business analogy of his experiment. And I always put it up there because, like Sean was talking here, there's value in bringing experts to support you. You as an investor in real estate will have qualities, will have direction and vision, but there's a large amount of people that can assist you with your investment. And so don't be a Thomas, and reach out to those that can assist you, even if it's just to give you the initial learning, the initial push, like Sean was saying. You're doing a secondary suite for the first time. Maybe there's value to get somebody on board that would otherwise might not be on board once you understand how it's going. What I want to start with is giving you a little bit of a big picture of our cities right now in North America. And it becomes really important to start from the very large picture, because it gives you a better understanding of what it is you can actually accomplish. But as you know, like our cities in North America are not in the best of shape right now. And a large part of this is some of the mistakes we've done in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And these mistakes were made by that famous sprawling of residential development in greenfield areas. And sprawl by itself and growth in greenfield areas is not a problem by itself. But when this all started, the majority of the density that was actually produced with these development was about 3 units per acre. So we had 3 houses or so for every acre of land. And that include roads and everything else. And in the 80s and 90s, municipalities started to suffer financially and started analyzing what's going on. And they realized that 3 units per acre is nowhere near providing them the taxation benefit to be able to be sustainable financially. And so through the 90s, and even for the past 10 years, we've seen North American cities like Edmonton, Calgary as well, increasing the density that suburbs are built at. So we see suburbs being built now at much higher density. And in fact, we realize that unless you hit 7 units per acre, it's not going to be sustainable financially. The repair of the road, the maintenance of the road, the infrastructure, if you don't have 7 units per acre, you just won't be able to sustain your financial in and out. And what that does is it puts a lot of pressure on the commercial and the industrial developers, because the majority of the bills that are being paid by our cities is not from the taxation from your house. It's from the commercial developer, the industrial owners. These are the ones that carry the majority of the revenues for the cities. And they're the ones that really foot the bill for sustaining all of our infrastructure in our cities. So although we can develop suburbs right now at 7 acres, 7 units per acres, we're not really helping the long term. When we see suburbs being developed at 8, 9, or 10 units per acres, then suddenly we're starting to see a little bit of a balance where it's starting to generate revenue that can be used to cover other maintenance and other costs that past suburbs are not able to. And the other thing that we see quite often right now in cities, especially with large cities, is another type of growth. And we see the growth of our downtown. So the core of our cities is growing. And you look at the landscape in Edmonton, you look at the landscape in Calgary, you can see that our downtown, it has changed tremendously over the past 30 years. And that is the same idea of the residential growth that we see with the suburbs and the greenfield, is we see those core of the cities slowly expanding and getting bigger and bigger. And then when you have an expanding downtown, you see the neighborhoods adjacent to those downtown feeling a lot of pressure to densify, to be more intense, to have more commercial use, industrial use, and it's a good thing. So instead of seeing the suburbs being growth, only the suburbs being the growth of our city, we'll also see the downtown and the core growing internally in our cities. And this is where the opportunity is with investors. We have a core that is expanding in our cities. We have a return to the downtown for numerous reasons. People are going back to living downtown, the more urban life. And we have those suburbs being developed at much higher density. But in between, those suburbs that were built in the 70s and 80s and even early 90s, they're still at the original, close to the original density that we saw. And it's a little bit of a donut surrounding the core of our cities before the suburbs. And that area is where there's tremendous opportunities. And that's the area that, as an investor, when you're purchasing real estate, that you can make a huge, you can make good decisions that could generate a lot of return on your investment. So today I want to take this idea and give you an understanding, the big picture of why it is a good idea and why actually everybody's going to cheer you on if you're actually trying to integrate land use planning or zoning strategies into your portfolio and your investment. So I've got a little bit of a summary here, and I'll go from the big pictures and we'll go down to very specific criteria that I would invite any investors to start looking at when they're selecting real estate. And not only to buy them. And I think we often see that saying, well, I'm not buying anything, so I don't necessarily need to understand what could happen. No, I think there's value in understanding the landscape, the land use context of a property you own over time. Because every year things change. Every year there's some growth. Every year there's some changes in regulations that put one of your property maybe in a better scenario than it was 5 years ago. And in fact, if you're looking at selling some of your portfolio and you start looking at the potential in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years for your assets, you might actually not sell the properties that you thought you were going to sell first. And because it becomes a very different set of criteria that could actually help you make some better decisions. There's a lot of investment strategies when it comes to real estate. Of course, there's the construction, the flipping and renovating, which is extremely popular with, HGTV and how to flip a house and renovate it. And there's some good money to be done and made in this. There's also the ability to invest and leverage your portfolio and getting some capital over time, the buy and hold strategy. But the piece that I want to talk today is simply the land use planning piece and how you can add that to some of your already existing strategies. And when I talk about land use planning, it's as simple as this: purchasing a property or looking at a property and looking at its potential from a zoning standpoint. What is the potential for a property to be upzoned, to be zoned to a higher density, to a highest and best use, to a use that is much more intense than what it would be there? Think of the example of buying a single detached dwelling and turning it into a property that could have a fourplex. That's the zoning, that's the land use strategies that I want to discuss today. And it's really not rocket science in the sense of there's some really clear direction in North America, including Edmonton and Calgary, that is there. And like I said, all of these municipalities will cheer you along because they have some objectives themselves that they're trying to accomplish in redeveloping those old neighborhoods. One of the main advantage when it comes to zoning is it's not something you don't have to build, you don't have to hold a hammer at all. You can actually achieve rezoning just through a process and a paper trail, if you wish, and be successful. So it's an intervention that will take time, will cost some money, but is not very challenging in many ways. And it has a lot of benefits. And some of the main advantage, I call them the 3L. There's a local regulation, local issues, and local decision makers. And it's the bottom line, it's why it becomes so easy once you become aware of this to actually take advantage of this. I mean, if you look at some industries, like you look at Elon Musk recently, who last year invested huge amount in Bitcoin and had a huge influence on the market. You and I are not going to have that kind of involvement and that kind of influence on the stock market. We won't be able to lobby the federal government and get time with Justin Trudeau to convince them of changes in regulations that will benefit your company. We're not playing that field. But when it comes to real estate, the regulations are local. The zoning bylaw that we have in the city of Edmonton, in every city, not only they're different and they are specific for each of the cities, but they are built locally. So these are the regulations are in place to reflect the image and the identity and the desire of the municipality, and that's local. It's nothing else than the city that you live in that will benefit from those regulations, and they're much more approachable than federal regulations or provincial regulations. The other thing that is very interesting is the local issues. You know, there's always issues when you want to change regulation, you want to change zoning, but those issues, if you go through zoning strategies, they're local. They're not anybody in Newfoundland or anybody in BC when you're trying to accomplish something. They're going to be the people that lives on the block that you're trying to rezone a property for. These issues, those people that will have issues with what you're trying to do, or will try to block the development or don't understand why this should happen, they are all people in your neighborhood. The community groups that would get involved when it comes to zoning, they live in your neighborhood. You can actually go and sit down with them and have a conversation with them and try to understand what their vision is and what they would support, what they would be willing to do. And finally, the last advantage is the local decision makers. The counselor that is in charge of your neighborhood is somebody you can actually go and meet with. And you have the ability to call them up, say, I have a project, and you can actually go and sit down with them and, you know, call it lobbying. You have the ability to understand what they're thinking about, what they are trying to accomplish for their neighborhood, and influence what they're trying to do. So these three advantages are incredible. And also it puts you in a position where you can develop a very, very strong understanding of your municipality, of your city, or even of a neighborhood. I have clients that have been building and developing in the same neighborhood for the past 30 years, very, very successfully. They know everybody that lives there. They know what the issues are. They have known all the decision makers that have come into play over the past 30 years. But that knowledge is accessible, and you can actually build that over time if you take the time. And it's something that is available only when it comes to real estate. Because otherwise, at the provincial level or the federal level, you won't have the type of influence that you would have otherwise in real estate. So we have an influence, we have some advantage when it comes to real estate, but zoning that we have on our properties obviously is there for a reason. And understanding why it's there goes a long way to help navigate and shape what it's going to be in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years. Zoning will do four things. It will shape the local identity. So it's going to be creating a set of rules that will allow people to build things that the community at large are interested in. So it's going to reflect what people are interested in. And I'll show you a little image here. It speaks volume, but if you look at the city of Edmonton and you look at what you see that is being built, there's a zoning bylaw behind that to permit that to happen. But when you look at cities like this one, which also has regulation behind it, that would be built very differently because they have a very different local identity of what they want to accomplish. And that's what zoning does. It creates that framework to allow you to build something. The next piece, oh, I think I have somebody that's not on mute. The next reason why we regulate is to protect investment. So if you go into a city and you build a house, the last thing you want is that next door somebody builds, I don't know, a meat packing plant. And so zoning will allow to make sure that there's some stability in a neighborhood, that when things evolve from one type of use to another, that it does that through a transition over time. And so it protects the investment that those that have made so far, and it makes sure that the evolution of these neighborhoods is actually consistent. One thing that's interesting about communities is they are full life cycle every 25 years. So every 25 years, you're going to see a full rotation in a neighborhood, and you will see an evolution that will tip after that period of time of 20 to 30 years, where you're going to see a lot more changes in the community that is reaching that point, mainly because of the demographic, mainly because those that were there when it was originally built are no longer there or they're moving out. So it creates some different need. It creates different scenarios where these neighborhoods evolve tremendously. So over time, protecting those investments and ensuring that it still can evolve is actually quite important. The third main reason of why we regulate is the planning infrastructure. Cities invest a lot of money on roads and water and sewer and you name it. for them to understand where they should put their money, how much capacity they should have for water and where, and how do they maintain all of this is critical. And zoning goes a long way for that. And so we see sometimes in the inner city type redevelopment where we're trying to push for higher density, that we get to a point where we can actually make those infrastructure fail. So we build so much more density that suddenly, that street that has a stop sign can no longer have a stop sign. You need a full light system to regulate traffic. And that planning infrastructure is all linked with zoning to make sure that things evolve at a pace and in a way that it can actually be met by the local jurisdiction. The last piece of our regulate, obviously, lifestyle, safety, you name it. There's a whole bunch of other technical pieces for that. Lifestyle is a good one right now. It's very important to build mixed use type communities, which is not something that was very present many years ago. Safety, making sure that people can get to the house if there's a fire, that service can be provided. So all of these technical aspect of it is also regulated through the zoning. And they become elements that if you go through a zoning or rezoning and you understand what are the failing point of your community or where you want to build, you have the ability then to start planning to purchase the right real estate or piece of real estate. We had an example not long ago in a neighborhood that was very vibrant. And I think, it was in Calgary. The neighborhood was at full capacity when it came to water and sewer, and nobody was able to build additional density because there was no capacity. The main issue is not only they couldn't upgrade the capacity because it was costing a lot of money, but they couldn't even integrate additional water capacity for the fire department to be able to. So it froze that neighborhood for years. And that's the kind of information that if you buy in a community that is kind of frozen in time because there's huge investment needed, it might not be the right place to buy for 15 or 20 years because your value will never jump from a house. It's always going to stay a house and you won't see that evolution in that neighborhood. So understanding these pieces gives you a good insight for your investment. When we talk about planning infrastructure, this is a picture I quite like from Vancouver in 1977 and in Vancouver in 2007, taken from the same spot. And you can see what it was, and not that long ago. And 30 years later, a hugely dense city. Imagine the investment and the capital investment of infrastructure in order to achieve that. It didn't happen by mistake. The regulations that is behind it allowed it to happen and allowed it to happen in a progressive fashion so the municipality could meet the intention and could meet the need that was created by this neighborhood. So big picture in terms of the planning structure, and we talked about zoning a lot, and it's what we see. You're buying a property, you say, what's the zoning? You're selling a property, what can I do? What is the zoning on it? Am I allowed to have a daycare? You name it. That's the piece that is really at the bottom of the regulation. It's really representing what is there or what could be if it's not at the highest and best use. But above that, we have a number of levels that give us a lot of insight on what could be. Because very often, zoning will represent what's on the ground. It doesn't really reflect the future vision of the city. But that future vision of the city is actually set. It's available. You can read about it. You can see what the city is trying to accomplish. And you can see what the gaps are between what the zoning is and what the vision of the city is. So if we go from the top to bottom, we have the Municipal Development Act, which is the provincial regulation that said to city, put some policies and develop zoning. And you don't have to worry too much about this unless there's some really main issues with the development. But the first level of policy that is very important for an investor, in my opinion, is the Municipal Development Plan. The Municipal Development Plan is a vision for the city of Edmonton or any city, and every city has a Municipal Development Plan. What it does is it looks into the future 50 years from now, and it actually identifies the aspiration of the city and what they want to accomplish. And this is mixed with a level of land use planning of where they want to see industrial neighborhood, where they want to see commercial development to occur, where they want to see the higher density of residential development. That's the aspiration of the city. It's not only in land use and plans showing you what they want to do, but also there's some policy there that points in the direction they want to go. For example, they'll say things like, we want densification of certain neighborhoods, and they'll tell you which neighborhoods that is. So it gives you a very high view. I'd say if we look at the city of Edmonton, you're looking at 30,000 feet above. So it's not in the details like zoning is with the height and the setback and everything else, but it gives you that vision at 30,000 feet above ground. And it gives you a good vision. And it's actually a document they can read, and it's actually quite easy to read. It's quite accessible as a document. It's long, sure, but it's worth the time. It gives you a much more deeper understanding of what your city is trying to accomplish. And then we go and invest in certain neighborhoods. We have that in the background and we understand what is trying to be done. Below that is the area structure and redevelopment plans. Area structure plans is a big plan that shows what a new suburb is going to look like, where the roads are going to be, where the commercial development is going to be. And it's much more detailed than the 30,000 feet view of the municipal development plan. It's 5 or 10,000 feet above ground. What's interesting for us is not necessarily the area structure plan, because unless you're Brookfield or Karma or these kind of guys, it's not your plan to build. The area redevelopment plans is where it's really interesting. Each neighborhood, or the majority of them, have a plan that has been developed by their community, by their councillors, by the people that live in that community, that identify how they're going to implement the vision of the municipal development plan in a lot of details. It could be as detailed as this street, which is now a single detached dwelling, we want to see this as a commercial corridor in the next 20 years. Or this neighborhood there is low density, we want to protect this one because it's in good shape and it represents the community well, but we want to see densification in this other part of the community. So they have all these policy, all that direction that is very, very precise, and give you a roadmap of what they want to do with that neighborhood. So if you're looking at two properties, one being two single detached dwelling, one being in a conservation type residential development, one being the future multifamily, it becomes no-brainer that you probably want to invest in that community where maybe one day you'll be able to go from one house to 4 houses. And it adds to your investment value on the long term. But again, you have to understand what it is. And again, these documents are very, very accessible. You can read them and they are easy to understand. They're built for people to understand there. Below that, there's a whole bunch of policies that are in place, whether they're transportation policy, noise policy, and so on. All these policies sort of educate a developer or someone who's building to make sure that whatever is being built in the zoning will actually meet some of that direction in those technical aspects of a development. And then below all of this is the zoning. So if you look at a property that is zoned low density and you know it's in a neighborhood that is intended to be multifamily because you read the area structure plan, boy, does that give you a lot more to understand how you can invest in that property and what you can get out of it in the long term. We talk about zoning and rezoning a property. And one of the main questions people call and they say, all right, I got this property and I want to rezone it. And we say, great. And so we evaluate if it's a good candidate to be rezoned. And the one question, and it's a common sense question, it's one that is a real test to understand if you can or cannot, is if you look at the property, if you can answer the question why this property can be rezoned, why can we do a rezoning there, and why not everybody else on that block, you now have a candidate that has something that you can allow that the city would support for rezoning. So why you, why there, and why not everybody else is critical. Because when we look at upzoning one property in particular to go from single detached to multifamily of any sort or to commercial, the city has to look at it from a planning standpoint and say, all right, so if we want to allow commercial development or residential densification of that area, why just this property? Why is this one the one that is actually the right one? And you have to be able to answer that. And we'll talk about criteria a little later in my presentation, but that's the number one question we want to be able to answer when we look at a property, and we want to be able to convince people that we should rezone it. And if you look at this image, I like this. You know, people call and say, I want to rezone my property, and I say, where? And I look at it, and it's like a little house in the middle of a block that is residential, all built the same way. And they say, well, I'd like to put a fourplex on that property. And we're like, not really. We got to look at the context, and we got to figure a reason why this is a good idea to put commercial development there or higher density there. So if you have a property that you cannot answer the question, why there, why not everybody else, you probably don't have a winner in your hand. Here's another illustration that is actually quite interesting. It shows transition, and that's very important when it comes to planning. Nobody's going to put a force, there's not going to be any zoning that will force somebody to build a single detached dwelling next to a tower. You know, there's always a transition to make sure that the interface between the different development actually matches. So this is a good illustration to show multifamily in the corner, and then slowly as you go towards the left of that image, you have lower density development. And that's a good image of what transition is. And it explains a little bit the type of properties that you could look at. If you look at the properties on the other corner and say, I want to rezone this and put a multifamily building on it, you probably don't have a winner. But if you look at the property that's just next to that multifamily and say, you know, there's 3 units in there, I want to do 6, and I'll buy the one next door and I'll do 4, and I'll create that transition, suddenly you probably do have a winner, and you'll have something to tell, you'll have rationale to be able to support the idea that you have there. And not only that, it's not just trying to convince them that you're doing the right thing, it's to show them it's done the right way, because you don't have to convince them you want to densify a site. You don't want to convince anybody that you want to rezone, because it's the vision of most cities. What they want to do is densify those neighborhoods that are too low in density, that don't make sense from a taxation standpoint, and are not sustainable financially. So we're talking about criteria, so let's jump into this. And you know, there's a lot of criteria, there's a lot of technical aspect of it, but I thought these were sort of interesting, and it was part of a presentation or a training that I did with community groups, and to give them an idea of where can we see densification that you should say, yeah, this works, as opposed to always saying no, and giving them tools to evaluate. And so we have 8 criteria there. We talk about a corner parcel. That's a great one. Like if you do want to rezone the property and you're in the middle of the block, it's tough to justify. But if you're on a corner, and that's where we see some of those densification occurring, then suddenly you have 2 roads adjacent to you, you have probably a lane in the back, you don't have as much impact to the neighbors, you only have 1 neighbor, and suddenly a corner parcel is much more suited for upzoning of a property. Proximity to transit. How close are you to a rapid bus route or the light rail system, or anything that could allow somebody that would live in a building that might not be a single detached with a double car garage and be able to use transit. So that's another good criteria that I would invite everybody to consider. Located on a high traffic road. You know, if you're on a corner parcel and you're on what we refer to as a collector road that has more traffic, more capacity, you're in a better position. And also you're doing a service to most people as well. Multifamily buildings are always built in a way that can accommodate additional noise, it can accommodate additional traffic adjacent to them. It's a lot more convenient to have an apartment on the 3rd floor of a multifamily building next to the busy road than it is to have the trampoline for the kids next to the busy road, right? So the interface with a high traffic road is also a very good criteria to see a property evolving over time. You know, we look at the road system, and I'll point this out, and maybe you'll start seeing it when you're driving around, but you know, we have highways and we have residential roads, but all in between, there's a whole hierarchy of road system. And all of these roads are bigger and smaller, and they have a higher capacity or a lower capacity for traffic to be accommodated. And so the higher capacity, the more you can put commercial, industrial, and high density type development. And the lower the classification of the road, the more we're trying actually to reduce the traffic, make it slow down, and make sure that it's more convenient to a low density neighborhood. So looking at that road system, and even on a map, to be able to look at properties, even before even you show up to go visit a potential purchaser, you have to see what the main system of roads are and what you have adjacent to you could be a good indication of what can be in the future. Adjacency to commercial or multifamily is a key one. We talk about transition. So if we have a multifamily building, a 4-story, and next door there's a little single detached dwelling, you know what? You probably have a winner there to create a transition between the multi to the residential next to you. So you can be part of developing that transition and actually allow your site to be rezoned to a more dense type use. Or it could be a commercial type development. If you're a little corner site, residential, and across the lane there's a 7-Eleven, chances are you could probably do something from a commercial standpoint, and it would be very consistent with what you have in your neighborhood. The number 6, this is the homework, really. It's the planned transitioned area. So it's the idea of read those documents. They'll tell you where they want to see some of that densification. They'll tell you where they want to see the commercial corridor. They'll tell you how high they want to see development in these areas. And you'll have a better idea of what the community is looking for. But to actually select something in an area that is already planned to be transitioned, or that has plans in the future to do so, is your homework. And that doesn't show when you go on site. That doesn't show when you look at a map. You actually have to read those documents, and it's going to give you a good insight. Access to a site, it's always an important one. If you don't have a proper access because of any reason, whether there's a large intersection that doesn't allow a driveway to be built next to it, then suddenly you have some limitations, physical limitations. And when we talk about proper access and all the physical limitations, that's an important one. And very often, these are the type of limitations that you probably want to bring an expert and say, how about this site? Look at the grades, look at the retaining wall there, look at, there's a lot of things that we can mitigate, but there's things that it's just not possible to mitigate, and creates physical barrier to any sort of development beyond what's existing. And the last one, my favorite one, is looking for unique characteristic. If you have a site that is unique, if you have a site that is like nothing else around, you probably have something that allows you to make a case of what can be done with it. Imagine a residential neighborhood, and at the entrance, there's one house with roads on 3 sides because of the way the roads were shaped. Then suddenly, you have something that's very unique. You may actually have something that would be supporting commercial uses or supporting multifamily type uses. So unique characteristic to a site, whether it's the shape of the site, whether it's the grades of the site, its location, the way it's surrounded by roads. This is all very important to identify, and it also can become the criteria, the piece that makes your zoning play successful. How to use this, I can tell you a little bit how we use that kind of knowledge as we go forward. You can have a specific project or a strategy, so you can say, all right, I'm going to become a townhouse developer, and I'm going to look for these sites that could accommodate townhouse development. So that could be sort of how you use that knowledge. But you could have existing asset that probably could be rezoned. You could have existing asset that could have intensification even within the zoning you have. We get called very often by groups and say, all right, we have 15 apartment buildings. How much more units can we put on these 15 sites? Tell us which site could we develop. Tell us how much capacity this commercial site has. Tell us, are we going to be able to put office on the 2nd floor of this strip mall? And it's trying to find additional value on an existing asset. And that can only be achieved if you start looking at all these policies and looking at those criteria and looking at what is possible with this property in the context you're in. The other thing that I think can be used easily is adding criteria to your purchase. And I should add to this, adding criteria to your purchase or your sales. What are you going to buy? People, those that will do the buy and hold, will look at the return on their investment as quick as possible. And sometimes it works for 2 properties. One is cheaper and have a better return, so they'll go with that. But what if one of them is on a corner adjacent to a 7-Eleven and is just slightly less interesting from a return standpoint? I'd say that 7-Eleven becomes quite interesting in adding a criteria, saying, you know what, I will make maybe a little bit less money over a few years, but oh my God, I might actually be able to sell this or rezone this for an apartment building of some sort. So adding criteria in your purchase or even into your sell, say which one I'm going to sell because I want to liquidate some of my assets. Maybe you don't liquidate the same asset if you start looking at what can be from a zoning standpoint over time. And with that, listen, our company, Permanent Masters, we support groups like investors like you that renovates property, add to properties. We assist in the zoning side. We assist in evaluating assets and provide strategy for portfolio. We do that all the time, every day. We do hundreds of those every year. And we'd be more than happy to support you if you have any question. I'd be more than happy to support you if you have questions. I do have a program which would allow a group, let's say, that has a portfolio to come and see us and say, let's evaluate that portfolio. You can buy a few hours package and a few meetings. And what we do in these things, which is critical, is we don't tell you what you should do. We navigate and we walk you through what the process is so you can learn as you go. And then you become a better investor. You understand the zoning play better over time. And that's a really good way to do this. The other thing that we do too is support on a monthly basis. If you say, listen, I have a lot of assets, we sell and buy things every month. You can buy a package and have a couple meetings a month where we can evaluate what you're looking to buy, what you're looking to sell, what you're looking to do, or even considering zoning or rezoning properties. We can assist you in that as well. And with that, I hope it wasn't too long, Sean. And I know it's a lot of information, and I sure hope that I can get those wheels spinning for everybody who's listening today.
That was great, Brian. Thanks for coming on. I know you, in our discussions, you have a couple more presentations that gets into a few different topics, like, basement suites, and forget what the third one was, but certainly.
Yeah, we do have presentations that goes into more like the renovation side. We have a presentation that goes more into redevelopment type. So things that are a little bit more specific. And it really depends on your group, Sean. If there's more of a need for people to say, we renovate all the time, it'd be good to learn a couple of things of how to be efficient doing this. I'd be more than happy to come and assist you with all of this.
Yeah. I know the clients that I pointed your direction are quite happy with what happened. Your people know to have the right types of drawings and all the right stuff, and it's not do it yourself, go down to City Hall and they say, no, that's not right, and come back, and it goes to the bottom of the pile, right? And if you got private money out there doing a flip or doing some renovation and it's costing you $1,500 a month, and a few bucks for permit masters looks pretty cheap at the end of the day. A lot of the things that you can do is something that people spend money on anyways, as far as the drawings and some other stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. And like we often, because of the volume of work we do, we often, the bearer of bad news, we'll be able to tell them, you can spend time and money, but it's not going to work, and try to find solutions for whatever intent was to start with. I think, I talk a lot about knowing your community, understanding the regulations. That's what we do every day, and we do hundreds of those applications. So we have not only a good understanding of the regulations as you read them, but a good understanding of how the city is going to implement them and who's going to implement it how. And that's critical, I guess, in all of this, because in Alberta we navigate in a world that is actually not zoning, it's land use, and land use is discretionary. And so it has a different level of negotiation with municipalities when you know that no matter what the rule is, they have discretion to say yes or no, no matter what. So it creates some friction, but it also opens up a lot of doors as well.
Okay, we're going to open up. If anybody's got some questions, we can have a couple here for Brian to answer tonight, or you can choose to phone them directly. So
yeah, you can call me directly. I've got my email there. Feel free to give me a call. And the more we talk and look at properties, the better we are. So we never say no.
Yeah. Okay. If you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and let's.
I do have a question. So I don't know if this is a too broad question, but I have a tiny home in Edmonton with a house, and one of our goals in the coming time is to do tiny home communities. And I know that the rules right now say you can only have 2 on any residential lot in the city of Edmonton. I'm not sure on some of the acreage properties and anywhere else, but is there a way in Edmonton that you could get around that rule, and how would you do so, or even evaluate where you could do it?
Tell me your question again. I don't think I caught that. You were cutting off a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I was just talking about where you might be able to do tiny home communities, like having more than one tiny home on a lot, because in Edmonton right now we can have tiny homes. I have one, but it's, you're only allowed one house and one tiny home or two tiny homes and that's it. So
You know, like
it's how
the tiny homes movement has been quite challenging because a lot of the regulations we face, they're based on the size of the lot, and the zoning allows a certain number of residential unit per lot. So the tiny homes doesn't really give you any benefit unless you build the community with smaller lots. The only place that I've seen successfully implementing those tiny homes is by building laneway house. So you have a house, a principal house, and you put a laneway in the back, and you use the products that would be, 400, 500 square feet, and it works quite well for the laneway house scenario. But community base, we don't see them in Calgary or Edmonton at all right now. And
I know, and I have a laneway house one. I'm just
oh, there
trying
you
to
go.
figure out. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if we went into the country somewhere like Parkland or stuff. But like, is there other places you could do it, or I mean, I don't know.
So
some in the U.S. I just don't know how you could ever do it.
Actually, that's exactly it. So that's the only place that I've seen it successful, is to go outside in different communities and buying land, rezoning it, and subdividing it for the tiny house model. That's the only place where it's going to be successful. The challenge, though, when you go outside of the city, is you have a huge costs for infrastructure, because a lot of these communities that are embracing it, they don't have water, they don't have sewer, they don't have roads. You don't have to build all of this for them. So it has to be big enough, and I've yet to see somebody coming in and developing something at a larger scale that would allow for this. And I gotta say, the only model that is 50, 60 years old is the modular trailer park type user, where they have one large parcel with lease area, and the tiny homes would work out quite well with this. But we don't see those being developed anymore in municipalities, especially the large one. They carry a stigma and they don't like them.
Just FYI, in Edmonton, they've got what's called the Homes for Vets or Homes for Heroes program. And they built a whole bunch of tiny homes. I'm not sure how many square feet there are, 400,
oh, yeah,
something like that. You can find, if you Google Homes for Vets or Homes for Heroes, it's on 153rd Avenue and about 95th Street. They just finished it here recently and took the fence down so you can see what's going on there. So there's probably, I think they're built in not individual tiny homes. They're built as small complexes there, but it's kind of an interesting project. So.
Yeah, and they have those in Calgary, I think, too.
I see Bavin is unmuted. He must want to ask a question. We can't hear you, Bavin. No.
Now?
There you go.
I'm so sorry. It was muted. So yeah, I'm actually working on one project where there's like a cottage community, so there's it's like a resort style, but it's a cottage. So each individual cottage, like 800 square feet.
Where is that, Bavin? Which community is that in?
It's at the Lake Isle.
The Lake Isle. Yeah, we see that in the summer villages. They are generally supportive of that type of cottage community, and it works well for the tiny home model.
Yeah. I have one question, Brian. I was thinking on one was there are different classifications about RF1, RF3, RF4 about the zoning. And when we do how many square feet allowed to build, is there like a thumb rule, or is there like something you based on?
For the square footage, so
Yes.
most of the land use district, and you're talking about Edmonton, they actually have some very specific lot coverage requirement that will range anywhere between 40 to 50%. And not only you'll have the very specific lot coverage, but it's going to be broken down as well. You'll have the lot coverage that could be for the principal building and the lot coverage that could be for the accessory building. So the total is not necessarily all for the building, although this is always something that you could manipulate in a way or obtain variance for and be able to have a development that would reach additional density or additional square footage.
So how much more percentage you can you see, and the city will likely will be okay with it, even though if you get the variance or permits?
That's a context question, Bevin. So that's one of those where if you're surrounded by small buildings and you want to pick a site in this and you want to have a large building and go beyond the lot coverage, it's going to be a tough sell. But if you're in an area where you have very large building to start with, and then you want to go beyond that, then it might be an easier sell. We see more often the ability to use the square footage for accessory building with the principal building, as opposed to be able to go over the maximum lot coverage. But again, it's really a question of context, and it's a question as well of what you're building. We've seen cases where I was able to convince municipalities to go at a very high lot coverage because we were building a one-story building for a number of reasons, but that building had to be one story. So we're making the case, hey, it's low build, we can go higher lot coverage, and it's the same square footage as the rest of the community. So it really depends. I'd say it's the kind of question that if you have a specific property, feel free to call me and we can look at it together, and I can give you maybe a little bit more insight in terms of what I think could be done there.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Brian here?
Could I ask a question about, so during the rezoning, if I already have like a triplex, and during the rezoning it finds out, so it's a non-conforming property, so it's been grandfathered in. So if I start the rezoning, is there any risk that the city may come down and be like, well, this is non-conforming triplex and the zoning wasn't that, you have to go backwards?
Yeah, so, okay, so that's a loaded question. So here's what we would do to evaluate the risk for this. When you say it's grandfathered, it means in technical terms legal non-conforming, but it means that you would have had a permit to start with and the regulation changed. So what I would say to protect your interests is to find, first of all, if it was actually ever permitted to start with, and if it was, and you go and apply for rezoning, no matter what you do, they won't be able to ask you to remove it. But if you never had a permit or you never able to prove that you had an approval in place, and then you go for zoning and you bring this property in light with the local jurisdiction, you face the risk of them saying, actually, you're not supposed to be there. You never were supposed to be there. So please, we'll give you 30 days and change that.
Yeah, that's what I purchased it as a multifamily, but I don't know if there was ever any permits. And so now I'm trying to figure out if I can increase the density on it. And in the process of doing that, I'm like, okay, well, am I opening up a can of worms and potentially getting myself in more?
You potentially do, but it would require a good legal search of the documentation to see what was actually originally approved, and you can find that. And keep in mind, and it's true for any sort of project, it's not the responsibility of the city of Edmonton to maintain records. So if they don't have records of something that was approved, although you know it was approved, it's your responsibility to go and find a permit somewhere in somebody's basement. And we've had case of things being built in the 60s, and we're never able to convince local jurisdiction that it was a legal non-conforming building. So you got to do your homework, but you may be able to find something, even if it's taxation documentation, even if it's old documentation or drawings that would have been provided to the city. Anything could help to make the case.
Okay.
Before, just want to add to your question. Before COVID, I went to city for something, and I had similar situation for one property. Then they actually can give you all history if you are owner of the property.
Yeah, they have an archive there, and they should be able to have something. But even if they don't, it doesn't mean that they didn't have a permit. So you can go and give them your address and ask what they have on file. They'll be able to dig out whatever they have, which might not be much.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
We got a question from the chat there from Carter. He wants to know, is there anywhere in Edmonton zoned for a basement suite in a home and a garage suite on the same property? So three.
The answer is no. It's one or the other. We refer to it as secondary suite. If you have a third one, is no longer secondary, is, I don't know, tertiary or something. So it's generally one unit in addition to the principal building. There is some zoning that allows for additional units, but it's not a suite and it's not a garage suite. It's just additional density for the site, and you can achieve that. But it's not the low density single detached plus a suite designation that would authorize that to happen.
There was a change in that for RF1, RF2, and RF3 just last year in Edmonton, and Ashley presented on that recently. And you are allowed to have a basement suite and a garden suite, but only in those zones. No new neighborhoods.
It depends on where you are. So there's some, you're right, there's some policies, but they no longer call them that. So you'd have like essentially a 3 units development on your property. And those designations would allow to achieve that. But it's no longer the secondary typical that we know, the basement suite in a single detached dwelling on an RF1 type district or a typical district.
Yeah, Jason just said that Rosenthal has new build houses with basement suites and garage suites. And I think that's where Linda, you got some properties.
Yeah, that's where I invest, but you can't do both. I mean, Zoria and I both, and lots of other investors in our group have tons of houses with garden suites and tons of houses with basement suites, but currently you're not allowed to do both on one lot. So some of us put sort of an in-law suite in the basement. I have one where I got it approved by the city with no oven. I do rent it to one family, which I, got that approved, but that's still not an actual separate basement suite.
Yeah, and like there's neighborhoods that are being built right now, and there's a lot of examples, even in suburban areas, where municipalities open up the door to do a lot more than they have in the past. And a lot of these districts, they're not quite applicable to the entire city still. They're not the basic district. Very often they are based on what we refer to as a direct control bylaw. But there's a lot of interesting things there. The key there is don't hold back. If you know that you have something that is doable, feasible, this is where suddenly the zoning play becomes interesting, where you can actually build something or rezone an area or rezone a property to actually achieve something like this. We've seen properties where we've been able to do, we had 2 properties and we were able to do 4 in the front and 4 in the back in a residential low density neighborhood. So there's ways to go about this. And again, municipalities are very supportive. If you can find a way in a product that would not be creating impacts, that would still meet some of the capacity for infrastructure, you'll be okay. It just takes a little bit more work, but there's some neighborhoods that are much more creative from a zoning standpoint too. Does in-law suite need permit too? Yeah, it doesn't matter who lives in a suite. A suite is a suite because of what it contains. So a kitchen, a living area. So it's not who lives in it. The only place in Canada that I know of that define a use also with the user is in Vancouver. And they actually registered on title that whenever the mother-in-law leaves, the suite has to be dismantled. That's the only place I can see that. Otherwise, in Calgary and Edmonton, if it looks like a suite, it's a suite no matter who lives in there.
Okay. Right. Well, Brian, thanks again for stopping by, and hope we can get you on in the future. So.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sean, for having me. And before we go, I just wanted to do a little shout out. I have my nephew who joined us today. And what's interesting is today, he actually got his urban planning degree from the same university I did 27 years ago. So I just wanted to give him a shout out and thank him for joining us tonight. And I want to thank you for inviting me. This is a great group. Thank you for the questions. And please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have any questions, just send me an email and we'll go from there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Our next segment we're going to do would be a quick one, is called Steals and Deals. So if you have something out there that you want to share with the group, a property for sale or need a service or anything like that, have at her. I see Lona, you're unmuted.
Yeah, but I don't have to go first.
Why not?
Okay, twist my arm. So I'm part of a real estate investor group that is involved with a project in the Westmount area, and it's two skinnies, and it's about a block away from Westmount Shopping Center, and they were just finished. They're 1,800 square feet each, 3 bedrooms, 2-car garage. There's a couple decks on a main deck and a bedroom deck on one, and they're beautiful. You could do executive short-term rentals there. You could do Airbnb, and of course, you know, lots of space for families. So if anybody's interested in more information, I'll put my name and my phone number in the chat. Thanks.
Anybody else got a steal or a deal or anything that they want to share? Or
Hi guys, I'm Bhavin. There's one auction happening tomorrow, and it's for commercial actually property. Seems pretty good. So anybody interested to participate, I just shared a link, and that might be a good deal.
excuse me.
Yeah, I can jump in. Hi, everyone. My name is Zoria Boulanger. I'm an Edmonton engineer by trade, and now I'm full-time investing in real estate, and I'm the co-founder of Bree Properties. And right now we are focusing on helping busy professionals invest in real estate so that they can retire early. And we're focusing on multifamily in Edmonton, like specifically brand new builds. We have 14 doors right now, and we're taking possession of 20 more this year. So if that's something that's of interest to you, then, or you're curious to know about like how we're doing it or what we're doing, then I'd be happy to talk to you. So just reach out.
Thanks, Zoria.
Hi, it's Nathan here. Sorry, just multitasking here, doing some work in the garage. But I have a company called Sunrise Home Buyers, and we're looking for motivated sellers to find off-market properties. We had one that went for I think well below market in Inglewood in December, and actually just had another one in Kilkenny that went fairly quick. But we're looking at properties every week and talking to sellers and get on our buyers list. I'll put my email in the chat at Sunrise Home Buyers if you're looking for a project. We're looking primarily for single family homes.
So you're a wholesaler then, Nathan?
That is correct.
Where's the old guy tonight? Hasn't been on last couple of shows.
Well, that is the $1 million question.
Anybody else got something to bring up? No? All the steals and deals. Usually what we do at the end of our show is we split ourselves up into breakout rooms and we can chat.
Hello,
Yeah.
Sona.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah,
Oh. Did you have something to share, Jack?
yeah. I own a renovation company. I do renovation works, including basement development and light commercial renovation. And I'm going to put my contact details in the chat box. And if you have any type of small or large renovation, you can contact me. And I'm here doing these things since last like 7-8 years now in Edmonton area. So I have quite a bit expertise in renovation works. So you can contact me on for any type of renovation, commercial and residential. Thank you.
Going once, twice, 3 times. So I'm going to put everybody into breakout rooms and we'll run them for maybe about 15 minutes and maybe swap them out next go around, and then you can talk all night if you want after that. So we'll go for.
How many do you want, Sean? I can set it up.
I got it
Yeah.
all ready to go here. So
Oh, you got it ready? Okay, good.
yeah, 5 rooms. So you'll see it, and if you are bored, you can just leave the meeting, or if you want to chat for about 15 minutes with everybody there and find out what everybody's doing, we'll have a round 2 where they'll last as long as we want to stay. So here we go.
Hi there. Hi, Michael. Hi, Tyler. You guys got to unmute. Hi there.
Oh, can you hear me?
Hi, Tyler. Yep.
Hello. I'm just mid painting, so I'm going to stop now, but
Okay.
I've been multitasking.
Yeah, I think the rest of you guys are still on mute. Anne is on mute. Maria, Elvis, RC, Andrew T, Michael. Hi, Michael from Fort McMurray.
I can hear you. I'm not sure if everybody else can.
Yeah, no, it's just they're muted. We won't be able to hear what they're saying. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the session tonight. Sorry, we had technical difficulties at the start of the program. I'm not a Zoom expert. I'm a WebEx where I work. So, and I think it's different on a Mac than a Windows machine. So apologies for that. Hopefully everybody got some benefit of our speaker. Does anybody want to say anything? Does
Yeah, I
anybody
really,
want to buy my skinnies? I need my skinnies to go.
so you must know a little bit about what the speaker was talking about then, if you built some skinnies.
Well, actually, it's an investment where the builder went into foreclosure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so as private investors, we're trying to get the skinny sold so everybody can get paid.
Well, that seems like a good idea.
Yeah, so that's one of, I guess one of the biggest things about real estate is, you don't know what you don't know. And until you actually, come up against something like that, it's a learning experience, because I've never ever been kind of involved in a foreclosure. So it's interesting to learn the avenues and the legal stuff about it.
Lona, can you share the location so we can do a drive-by, or?
Yeah, I can.
And what are the prices?
Yeah, and they're beautiful. Like Jim and we had a bunch of investors come over on Saturday night, and like dentists and private equity guys and that. And they thought the units were beautiful. I said to Jim, I says, we could probably buy one of these for ourselves. But so the address is 11315 and 11317, 132 Street. So it's just right off, it's just like one block east, I guess it would be, of the Westmount Shopping Center. And the appraisal was $565 a side.
So is that only 3 bedrooms without a basement suite or something like those?
The basements are unfinished.
Okay. And you said it's good for short rental. So what does it mean? Does that have some special features that can accommodate with that?
Well, because it's more of an executive type of home, you could rent it to, like, if there's executives having to work in Edmonton for a short period of time, you could use it as an Airbnb if you wanted to. Again, like, there's lots of room in the units for having family stuff, fireplace, open kitchen, living room. One's got a mud room and one's got a front area dining room, or you could use it as an office. They're very nice units. This builder always was, his work was phenomenal. I don't know what happened to him, but anyways, I put the address in the chat.
Did you mean the builder built it and then went foreclosure and then you guys bought it?
Yeah, we're part of the private investment group. Yeah.
With that builder?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Would that be okay for you to disclose, like, the cost per square feet for that building?
I'm not sure what the square, like what it is per square foot, but each unit is $565,000.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
And, when which is not too bad for an 1,800 square foot home, because, nowadays for inventory, you're looking at 400,000 and up for a house anyways.
Yeah, and I heard from a few realtors and also other investors, they said really in this month, the market is really heating up.
Yeah.
So don't worry, you will sell it.
Oh, yeah.
soon.
I don't think we'll have a problem at all.
Mm.
Yeah. But I do know there's, in our group, there's quite a few people that do Airbnb and short-term rentals. So, and I was actually talking to someone today about maybe doing a presentation on short-term rentals in the near future here. So.
Yeah, the thing is with COVID right now, you really can't do that kind of business unless you're holding for future Airbnb business.
I think a lot of them are actually having no problems with that. They probably have their contractors go in and change things. I know one guy who's got 51 of them, and he's got it all set up on an app where he uses WhatsApp. And he just sends out a notice, this unit has to be cleaned. And they go over there and they clean and they put new towels and stuff like that in. And, they take the laundry out and take it to get done. And he's got quite the system set up.
Yeah, what I meant is people can't travel right now. That's the thing.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I still think there's lots of people that are doing, even my hairdresser was telling me she's going to Canmore to stay for a week. So, maybe it's not going to other countries and that, but Edmonton was quite high up on doing Airbnbs. Like they had a lot of listings in Edmonton just for that. And so I think, it draws people from the provinces and, they can still, even though they might not be traveling by airplane, they can still drive into the province, right? And there's lots of people that are, there's lots of people that are doing Airbnb for medical patients too, where, they have to come, they can't get the medical attention, so they come to the hospitals and get their treatments, but they still have to live someplace, right?
Okay, yeah, that's what I really did not understand. How Edmonton could do the Airbnb business. Who would be coming to here? Like for what reason? We are not very close to the mountains in Edmonton, right?
But there's still lots of people coming into the province. I think I saw the other day there was 7,000 people that came into Alberta in this last month. So, whether it be jobs or whether it's executives traveling for work or projects, sometimes they can get an Airbnb cheaper than they can get a hotel room.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, thanks for sharing the information.
Yeah, no problem. Does anybody else have anything to say?
I had an Airbnb just after COVID set in. It's no longer an Airbnb, but yeah, there was a lull, but it certainly picked up and it just turned into a lot of business related visits and people that lived in, say, Calgary and had a contract to do some work here or things like that. So there's still a market for it.
Well, my dentist, I just had to go see him for some crown work, and he was telling me that he had 5 properties that he's switching over to Airbnb. So, the revenue stream is higher on an Airbnb. But again, if you're the one that's managing the properties, it can be a lot of work.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any changes now to whether or not banks will look at Airbnb income and as also insurance. That was a big thing for me was, they want to see a tenant in the unit for purposes of calculating income, and they wouldn't look at Airbnb income.
Yeah, that was Linda Hayes that was on the presentation tonight. She knows a lot about Airbnb too, and they were going to do a presentation probably in the future on that too, and give an update sort of like on the Edmonton what's happening in Edmonton and what the rules are, for Alberta. So, we're probably going to do a session on that coming up in the next couple of months. So, stay tuned. Hopefully by then, things will be picking up.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But like I say, people are, maybe they can't travel to Maui or things like that, but if they can go to Jasper and stay in an Airbnb for like a week, it's just as restful and, maybe even better. You're not spending as much money. So, anything else? Michael, I know you're out there. Tell us what you're looking for in Edmonton when you move here. Michael? Michael doesn't want to talk to us, I guess.
I wonder if anybody might feel comfortable chiming in if they've done any, put together any fourplexes or whatnot, taking the corner lot or build a front to back duplex or any of that kind of thing.
I know I've got one property that I'm thinking of doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a big lot. It's got a 4-car garage on it, and it's a lot of it's one corner lot, and I'm thinking, I could probably put like 2 skinnies on there very easily. And there's quite a few places that will actually do it. And if you have, the only problem is when you take a piece of property and like put 2 skinnies on it, the banks, you have to be careful with how you set up with the mortgage, because they can come back and actually claim, like, if the mortgage was 300,000 and you split it into 2, and they could charge you a mortgage on both properties, is what I've heard. So you have to be careful that way.
Oh, yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was Barry McGuire did a webinar on this, and he said, if you're going to do that, you need to get approval before you start, subdividing the lot, or putting 2 properties on one lot, because banks don't necessarily want you to do that, right? So you have to make sure that you can zone it that way first, and you get it set up properly, because if you don't, like, if you just take, let's say I have the house there already and the mortgage is like $250,000. Well, the bank, if I tried to rebuild now, the bank might come back and say, well, there's 2 properties there now, so you owe us $250 for this one and $250 for that one. So, you have to make sure if you're going to go ahead with that process, that you make sure you can do it, and the banks are okay with that.
That really doesn't make any sense. How much I own the bank is how much I own you, right? It can't be like, because I'm building 2 houses, you're asking for double.
Like I say, I just know that, if you talk to a mortgage broker, they might know a little bit more about that. But I just happened to ask that question, and that's what I was told. So, I haven't gone forward with mine yet, but, I'm thinking about it. Like, I've got a long-term tenant in there right now, but, you could very easily, probably get that rezoned. But again, like I say, I already have a mortgage on the property. So you would need to make sure your lender is okay with that before you start doing anything. Because, you know, they change the rules all the time.
This is
Lenders
very
are-
good.
These lenders are getting very particular on who they want to borrow to. And real estate investors aren't necessarily, you know, they're really picky about real estate investors and even in corporations nowadays.
That's a discrimination.
Well, you know, they've had a lot of mortgage frauds and stuff like that. So, you know, you might be a good real estate investor, but there might be some people that aren't as scrupulous or, you know.
Yeah, very good information. Thank you.
Even RECA right now is reorganizing where mortgage brokers have to be licensed and educated nowadays. Same with real estate agents and same with property managers. And they're starting to clamp down in RECA on who's not licensed. And, you know, even these property managers nowadays, they have to be licensed and they have to get education, and the brokerages have to be licensed. Otherwise, they are going to get fines. So, you know, if you have a property management company now, you have to make sure that they have a, you know, the licenses and education that they need in order to do business in the province now in Alberta. They've changed all of that. And a lot of that had to do with there was a lot of mortgage frauds going on.
It must be similar to BC then, where you can manage your own properties, but if you're professionally managing other properties, there's a, you know,
You have to be licensed.
provincially recognized course you got to take or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, even mortgage brokers, like a person I was talking to today, they had their mortgage brokerage license 2 years ago, and they let it lapse. And now, you know, if you want to do that, you have to take several courses and get your license again. You can't just get it reinstated. It's quite expensive too. So you can imagine that because they're doing this process, property management charges are probably going to be more in the future for real estate investors too, right?
Yeah.
And it's like if you buy a property and you got a joint venture partner, you have to disclose that right away with the lawyer so that they can tell the lender. And again, that has to do with mortgage fraud that have been, you know, going on from before. They're trying to clean all of that up. Okay, Sean says we have 2 more minutes before we change to a different breakout group. I was just wondering is there any topics that you guys would like us to have speakers in the future?
I'd be curious if anybody, if there's some expertise on syndication, you know, like investing as in that structure. Seems like you hear a lot about it, but not a lot of people have any experience.
Yeah, you have to, and like, is this to like people that are accredited investors?
Well, I guess it would depend on who your partners are, but yeah, just the general idea of investing in, say, multifamily property through the general partner / limited partner, you know, that kind of a structure.
Yeah, you have to be with syndications and that you have to be on the up and up, otherwise the security commissions will come after you, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. You can, I do know you can do it without filing with the Securities Commission if you're only appealing to people you have previous relationships with. But I think generally speaking, yeah, you're probably going to run out of those people pretty quickly. So that's fair. But yeah,
Okay.
be curious to know if anybody's had some success in that and what the path would be.
Okay. I'll put it on my list to tell people at the board meeting. Let's see. We had a last session, Linda Hayes did on new investors. So I can try and see if I can get the handout for that. Whoever MB is. If you send me your email address, I can try and get Linda's presentation for you and the recording. If you want to send me an email, it's lanachow@telus.net. Okay. Anything else, guys?
Thanks for hosting us.
You're welcome. It's my give back.
Yes, I was going to say thanks for all the great info. I learned so much every time.
Oh, you're welcome, Maria. Got some new faces here. Hi, Sean.
Sean, you're muted.
I am. I just talked to myself, so. So we'll start another round of breakout rooms, and once everybody gets back in, and we'll just go until everybody's doesn't want to chat anymore.
So I got one question that was on our breakout room there, Sean. If you have a property that you have up a house on in that, and you want to potentially put 2 skinnies on it, how does the mortgage work once you start doing that process?
Well, if you got 2 skinnies, you'll have